Hello, everyone, this afternoon. A beautiful sunny afternoon it is. Thank you so much for making the time for this really interesting session. It's Voices for Change, Evidence and Innovation in Supporting Children Experiencing Family Violence. I'm Mandy Charman, Senior Manager of the Outcomes Practice and Evidence Network, or OPEN, as you're probably aware, located within the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare. Firstly, if we have our acknowledgements, we would like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land in which we are meeting. We are currently on Wurundjeri country, and wherever you are, we would like to acknowledge your elders past and present. We'd like to acknowledge the Wurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations and pay respects to their elders past and present. We'd also like to acknowledge and pay respects to all the traditional custodians from the lands and waters that we've all joined from today. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' continuing connection to country and culture. We also recognise that sovereignty was never ceded and that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. You always have to have a little pause because it's very grounding, the acknowledgement. Now we're just on to some housekeeping. Please mute yourself. If you can ensure your Zoom name is your own, sometimes we do borrow our children's or our partners. So it's very handy to actually see who is on our call. If you can turn your chat box on, we really love these sessions to be interactive. And as Georgina and Lachlan and Tash and Emma talk, I'm really sure they'd want as many questions or even your reflections and thoughts. And we will share them back and pose them back to the appropriate person in the question and answer session. There is an option for closed captions at the bottom of the screen. If you have any issues, often, of course, we know now, if you leave the call and come back, that often sorts out the issue. But if not, contact Sarah Ryan. She will be visible throughout the session. And of course, this session is being recorded, so we can share it later, just so that you're aware, and that can factor into your thinking. Okay, we've got a wonderful session planned today, which profiles new research and practice innovations to inform our work in supporting children and families experiencing family violence. This event is one of three-part series. It's the first event in this series. The Centre is delivering in partnership with No to Violence, Safe and Equal and Sexual Assault Services Victoria. These three events, are part of a collaborative project we're working on together to focus on sharing research, best practice, and our joint learning to support families and children experiencing family and sexual violence. While this work is still developing, we wanted to start to talk about it and build your input and engagement, because that's where our success for this project lies, getting lots of engagement and interest. I'll now hand over to our project partners to talk a bit more about this. So over to you, Monica Campo.
Thanks, Mandy. My name is Monica Campo, so I'm the Senior Research Officer at Sexual Assault Services Victoria, and I'm part of the partnership group that Mandy mentioned for the Family Violence and Sexual Violence Knowledge Project. A little bit about SASVIC, Sexual Assault Services Victoria. So we're the peak body for specialist sexual assault and harmful sexual behaviour services in Victoria. We work to promote rights, recovery and respect for victim survivors and other people impacted by sexual violence and harm. And we do this by working collectively to change the attitudes, systems and structures that enable sexual violence to occur. I think you'll find there should be a link to our website that's just been put in the chat, and yeah, let me know, message me if you'd like to know more. As Mandy said, this event is part of a collaborative project and our partners are here today. So we have Kate Meacham from Safe and Equal, Britt Bailey from No to Violence, and Jeanette Anil and Mandy Charman from the Centre. And a link for each of those organisations has been placed in the chat as well. So our organisations have been working closely together with our member organisations to develop a family and sexual violence knowledge hub on the open portal. We will have a better name for it coming up soon, but at the moment it's the Family and Sexual Violence Knowledge Hub. And the idea of this hub is to strengthen and learn from practice, identify and address data and research gaps, and use and build the evidence base within the family violence and sexual violence sector. The Knowledge Hub will be available later this year. It'll be launched later this year, and it'll include resources tailored for those that are delivering services to families and children who have experienced family violence and or sexual violence. And these will include the latest research, case studies and successful practices, webinars, events, training, opportunities, and more probably. We're really excited about the value of this repository of shared knowledge that we'll have for all of our joint sectors. It's a really amazing opportunity for us to bring all of our work together in one place. We'll keep you informed as we finalise the Knowledge Hub and ready to launch. So watch this space for more info about the occasion. And back to Mandy.
Thank you very much, Monica. We're so excited too to be involved in such a great partnership as well. It's been a fascinating journey already, and I can just imagine what this is going to produce for our joint sectors. So very exciting. If you want more information, just feel free to drop any of us a line, and we're happy to talk you through some of the ideas, because you might have your own ideas, which we'd love to hear about. Okay, so on to our speakers in our event, Voices for Change, Evidence and Innovation in Supporting Children Experiencing Family Violence. Up first is Georginia Dimopoulos, a senior lecturer at Southern Cross University, who'll share key findings from the Children's Voices for Change research project, and will host a panel with our lived experience co-researchers, who I'm about to introduce in a minute. And the next part of today's session will be, we'll hear from Emma Nugent, a project officer here at the Centre, who'll launch the Snapshots of Good Practice case studies. Emma will then host a Q&A session with Stephanie O'Malley, who is a family services practitioner at Upper Murray Family Care. Following from each presenter, we'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers, so feel free to put your reflections and questions into the chat, and we'll pose them back to our presenters at the appropriate time. Presenters love questions, so feel free even just to reflect on your own practice, because we would all love to hear our shared experiences. Okay, on to our first presentation. Dr. Georginia Dimopoulos is a senior lecturer in law and a research associate of the Centre for Children and Young People at Southern Cross University. She researches across the areas of family law, children's rights and family violence, with a focus on strengthening children's meaningful, safe participation in decision-making processes. Georgina will be joined by Lachlan and Tash, who are co-researchers and lived experience experts, who will share their experience of working on the project and their insights about how we can improve family violence services to better meet the needs of children. Georgina, over to you. Could you please share your slides now?
Sure, thanks, Mandy, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we live, work and meet. For me, that's the people of the Yugambeh language group on the Gold Coast, where I'm based, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues in this session today. The focus of my presentation is on children and young people as family violence experts by experience. I'll first share with you some of the insights and experiences of children and young people who engaged in the Children's Voices for Change project as research participants, co-researchers, and youth advisory group members to enhance our collective understanding of the diversity and distinctiveness of children's experiences of family violence and the effectiveness of services in meeting their needs. After that, as Mandy flagged, there'll be a panel discussion where I'll hand over to the experts on this project. The two of the young people, Tash and Lachlan, who were integral to the success of this research project and who guided all phases of the project through their involvement as co-researchers and youth advisory group members. And so I hope you'll agree with me that that will be a real highlight of this session. The Children's Voices for Change project has been funded through the Victorian Government, phase 1 of Family Safety Victoria's Family Violence Research Grants program, to address the research priority children and young people as victims survivors in their own right. It's been led by Southern Cross University in partnership with Safe and Equal and the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare. And the project was supported by a project advisory group comprising experts from family violence and children's rights policy, practice, research and advocacy, as well as a youth advisory group comprising 4 children and young people with lived experience of family violence who were recruited through Berry Street's Why Change Lived Experience program and through Safe and Equals Lived Experience team. The Children's Voices for Change project applied a children's rights-based approach to understand what constitutes effective supports for children and young people aged up to 13 years as victim survivors of family violence in their own right. There were 4 phases of the project, and in my short presentation, I'm going to focus on phase 3, which was engaging with children and young people to understand their views, insights, and experiences of family violence support services and what they need to feel safe and well. 23 children and young people took part in the study, and they participated in an online, I'm not sure if the chat has appeared here. Sorry, and they participated in an online interactive activity. And this activity gave children and young people the opportunity to share what they need to feel safe and well and their experience of services, and to suggest what needs to change to improve services for children and young people. It included a combination of multiple choice, open text, and interactive questions, such as dragging and sorting boxes to rank items and selecting an emoji face to represent feelings. Now, importantly, the youth advisory group, of which, as I mentioned, Tash is a member, was integral to developing this children's activity and to crafting the questions and activities to make sure that they were accessible and appropriate for children and young people who would take part. The responses to this activity were co-analysed together with 7 children and young people in a series of workshops, and Lachlan and Tash also took part in that co-research and co-analysis process. And the aim of that was to give children and young people a level of ownership over the framing of the research findings. And that was really important and consistent with the approach that this project took to ensure that children and young people had some control over the narrative and the findings that came out of this research. The children and young people who did this children's activity ranged in age from 7 to 25 years. 11 identified as female, 8 identified as male, and 3 identified as non-binary. Now, a limitation of the data is the absence of children and young people, or the lack of children and young people from culturally and racially marginalised communities. So only 1 participant identified as Aboriginal, and only 1 participant told us that they sometimes speak English and sometimes speak another language at home. Over half of the children and young people disclosed that they have a disability, chronic health condition, or mental health condition, and the most common were anxiety, depression, PTSD, and ADHD. Most of the children and young people lived with their mother or with their mother and other family members, including their siblings. And we asked children and young people when they got help for their experience of family violence. And some young people shared or described the situation of violence that led to them accessing support, and I've extracted those responses here. We asked children and young people to list 5 things that currently make them feel safe and happy in their life, and 5 things that they need to feel safer and happier. And there was a clear consistency across both of those prompts about the safety and well-being needs of children and young people who are victim survivors of family violence. Most important were relationships and connection. Children and young people most commonly named their friends or their besties, their dogs and cats, their mother or their family generally, as well as siblings, grandparents, and boyfriends. And also prominent there was the need for positive and stable relationships, which for some children and young people could be found beyond their current friends and family. So Sam, aged 8, said, "If I had other safe adults that felt as good as my mother." Children and young people who co-analysed the data with the research team highlighted the importance of children who have experienced family violence having a safe and trusted person in their lives. And this included having a person they could bring their whole uncensored self to and not be rejected as socially unpalatable or too much. Over 1/3 of the children and young people referred to a type of security or safety mechanism that was attached to their living situation, including living in a gated community, a pet guard dog, new locks, a phone with tracking and GPS and security cameras. And notably, 2 young people listed no police or being away from police as important to them feeling safe and well. Over half of the children and young people identified a need for greater physical safety and security. And some of those responses really revealed deep feelings of fear and a desire to relocate or to have dangerous people dealt with. And so for Hannah, age 16, it was for my abuser to be locked away and having a different car and moving house. Over half the young people told us that a hobby or an activity was something that made them feel safe and happy. And young people also described health and well-being related activities as important. For some, the focus was on their physical health, and others referred to strategies for improving their mental health and well-being. Again, our co-researchers who analysed the data with the research team explained from their lived experience that healthy eating is not necessarily or exclusively related to a focus on improved health and well-being, but it can expose a child's specific experiences of abuse or neglect, such as irregularity of meals due to financially abusive or controlling behaviours. Greater financial security and housing stability was an unmet need for almost half of the young people. And Sam, aged 8, referred 3 times to the importance of being rich to have greater stability and safety in their living situation. Other young people wanted to remain with one parent or in the same house, to move to a new house, or to live with their partner. And Rowena, age 25, alluded to being homeless, seeking a roof over my head. There was also a need for additional tailored support, and young people shared that they wanted help with school attendance, people surrounding me who support me, regular therapy and mental health support. Now, 4 children and young people wanted greater autonomy and choice in their lives, and some identified specific physical possessions that they got comfort or pleasure from, such as their bed sheets, mobile phone, drawing book, teddies, and comfortable clothes. And Lisa, aged 11, referred to eating vanilla wafers and sleeping with a heat pack, while Jamie, aged 21, needed oversized clothes. The children's activity also sought to understand children and young people's experiences of family violence support services in Victoria. Participants listed a total of 21 different services from which they received support, and they're listed here. The most commonly accessed were the Orange Door, police, and counselling. The activity presented children and young people with 16 prompts that enabled them to share their experience of support services, and each prompt had 3 options: yes, no, and sort of. And it was accompanied with by an open text box that gave participants the chance to tell us more about their experience. Now, I'm just going to hone in on this one prompt, which is, did you get what you needed from the support service? We can see here that most children and young people did not receive all the support that they needed. Almost half indicated sort of, and over 1/3 responded no to this question. Children and young people elaborated on their experience, and they revealed concerns about service accountability to children as victim survivors in their own right, collaboration and cooperation between services, and broader systemic issues that impact children's ability to access supports. So Darren, age 13, described limitations in services' ability to work together to protect his safety. And he explained the services didn't speak to each other. They didn't speak to my school, and they put my safety at risk. The services were unaware that my dad was manipulating police. The Orange Door didn't speak to Kids Helpline. They didn't work together. They didn't speak to my school, who were really unprepared. After a while, I got tired of them listening, but not helping. Molly, aged 11, who identified as Aboriginal, described significant limitations in services' ability to meet her cultural needs, including due to their failure to see her as separate to her mother. And she explained, "We just want to be safe. We don't want police and child protection getting clapsticks when they find out you're Aboriginal, when your mob don't even use clapsticks or do dot painting. They think we are extensions of our mums, but we aren't. Get it that police and child protection aren't good and scare us." The children's activity also asked children and young people what needs to change to improve services. They identified the need to fill gaps in the service system, including through improved access to services, reduced wait times, longer service periods, more resources, and reduced turnover of staff. So Charlie, aged 12, explained, "I still can't talk about previous experiences now. Waitlist and options to psychologists are greatly lacking. I need much faster access to services." Children and young people also described the need for services that are directed and responses that are directed by the views, experiences, and wishes of children themselves. So they highlighted the need to engage directly with and to listen to and understand each child. So they suggested, listen to our ideas more, actually listen and follow the child's wants for safety. Speak to children about what's happening. And as Arthur, age 15, said, listen to kids because we don't make this stuff up. Oliver, age 15, reinforced the importance of active listening and providing individualised support. So he commented on asking kids what they need to be safe. This would mean that it's not assumed our parents know what we need and can make care and support be more individual. Children and young people also felt that services could do more to help them and their family members feel safe, including through practical supports such as security cameras and regular check-ins. And others suggested support beyond the immediate situation of violence, including free or low-cost mental health support to support children's effective recovery. Now, importantly, financial support was expressly identified by almost a quarter of the participants as critical to children and young people's family violence response and recovery needs. So Anita, age 17, explained family violence at a young age impacts kids for the rest of their lives if they aren't given the opportunity to grow out of it. People like myself who have had to stop working out of fear have received no financial support. Other suggestions from children and young people were more support in child-focused spaces, including at school, and better access to child-friendly activities. Several children and young people thought that services should have a greater understanding of children's experiences of family violence and particularly its impacts on their mental health and well-being. Some specifically identified the need for medical professionals, teachers and schools to better understand children's experiences, and they called for doctors who understand more and more information for school teachers. Something that stood out from the research was the number of children and young people who shared very stark reflections on their negative experiences with police. They recounted experiences where police had seemingly sided with the person using violence, where they were perceived to be lying about their experiences of family violence, and where police had failed to respond adequately to their situation. And Oliver, age 15, recalled the police were absolutely horrible. They were the worst part of everything we went through. So by comparison, the services were better because they didn't take our perpetrator's side or assume mum had coached us and that we were liars. Nothing can really change until the police change, unless it's possible to get help without police ever being told. Now, Tariq, aged 11, questioned why the burden repeatedly fell on his mother to keep him and his family safe. And he said, police have to stop the bad guy finding the people that they hurt. They need to stop the bad guy from finding and hurting us again. Why does my mum always have to move us? Angelica, aged 10, addressed the impacts of family law parenting orders on children and young people's family violence response and recovery needs. She reported living 50-50 between mum and dad, and Angelica drew attention to her care arrangements that required her to spend time with her father, who she didn't experience as safe. Angelica said, "Tell the courts what we need and make them listen. Tell the courts we want to live with mum because dad's scary. Help us to be safe. Some people don't understand. We need only people who are nice to kids." So how do we translate children's voices, insights, and lived experiences into practice? These guiding principles, the change guiding principles, have emerged from a synthesis of the findings across all 4 phases of this research project. These principles embrace child-centred, trauma-informed and rights-based approaches to engaging with children in diverse service contexts. I'll briefly talk you through the essence of these principles, which have been developed, again, with the expertise of the young people who participated in this research project. The first principle is create space and time. And this is about giving enough time and creating a safe space that's tailored to the needs of the individual child to enable the child to give meaningful feedback about their service experience. The insights and experience of children who participated in the research reinforce the need for child-inclusive spaces and for practitioners to dedicate time at the beginning of the service engagement to build rapport and to understand how each child prefers to engage. This is also about creating space and giving time for the child to ask questions to provide that meaningful feedback throughout their service engagement. Second principle, hear the child. And this is about active listening, so the child feels that their voice, views and experiences are being heard and understood. This forms part and a vital part of the ongoing process of children's participation. Hearing the child is understood here expansively to include identifying children's expressed views and wishes, not only verbally, but via play, facial expressions, body language, and art. The third principle, act on feedback. And this is about being accountable to the child by clearly communicating how their feedback will be used by the service and how it will be actioned in relation to the child themselves, but also for ongoing service improvement. And for a child to feel that they've been heard, adults need to respond to the particular type of support the child needs, which might be action-oriented rather than talk-based. And Lisa, aged 11, one of the respondents to the children's activity, said, "I don't just want to talk about what's going on, I want real help." Now, this research project has offered insights into services feedback-seeking practices and methods through the practitioner survey, and we do need to understand further how services use children's feedback. The fourth principle is navigate trust. This is about getting to know the child to establish a rapport built on transparency, understanding, safety, and mutual respect. Now, developing trust is essential for the child to feel safe to engage in support and to be able to open up and give feedback. Also important here is services following through on support that's been promised. A young person co-analysing the data with the research team explained, "Trust is a hard thing to build. It takes a long time, but it can be destroyed in an instant. Just having one person you can trust is life-changing." And another young person who was involved in the workshops to develop and analyse the data referred to having their practitioner like a friend. The fifth principle is give choice and agency. So this is about giving the child meaningful opportunities to participate in decisions about their family violence response and recovery needs, consistently with their age and evolving capacities, and with appropriate guidance and direction. The research findings really have emphasised the importance of choice for children who are victim survivors of family violence. And one young person told us, "It's about being able to choose something when everything else is out of control." The sixth principle is explain enough and ensure understanding. So here, give the child sufficient accessible information about the support that's being provided to them and about the feedback that's being collected from them. It's important here to also clearly explain any privacy and confidentiality limitations, including what will be done with the information that the child shares and its interplay with mandatory reporting obligations and child information sharing schemes. Also be transparent about what you can and can't do to support the child. So as one young person told us, don't give the child false hope. Also, it's important to confirm that the child understands the information being provided. Now, for the change guiding principles to be implemented in practice, there are a number of systemic obstacles that must be overcome that have emerged as key findings from this project. Now, a finding that's probably the simplest to articulate and yet the most challenging to implement is that services and systems must listen to, hear, and understand children. This research that has emphasised that we need to seek children's direct, unfiltered voices about their own family violence response and recovery needs to be able to meet those needs effectively. And the essence of this conclusion is captured by one simple request from Molly, aged 11. Molly said, start listening. Don't think you know. You can't see us as victims in our own right unless you actually listen. So that's all from me. Thank you. And I'll now stop sharing and once again introduce Tash and Lachlan, who were co-researchers and played an integral role in this Children's Voices for Change project and were instrumental to the success of this project. So Tash, could I begin with you? And hi, Lachlan, and hi, Tash. So I think everyone can see you now on the screen. Tash, could I begin with you? Could you tell us about your involvement in the Children's Voices for Change project? So what was your role and what contributions did you make?
Yeah, so I was part of the youth advisory group with, I think it was originally 3 other young people, but it ended up being 2. And we were sort of, I think we started off with conversations about how the activity should look, and some of that, I think one of the big things that came out of that was the need for co-consent and like having a trusted adult rather than just the parent or guardian be someone who sort of consents for that young person instead of it, or that child, instead of it being potentially a parent who may not be safe. So there was sort of those conversations that we started off really early on with, and then we sort of went into sort of looking at the children's activity, going through it in a lot of detail, like all of us together, and sort of going like this activity looks really good. This activity could do with a bit more working through, and a lot of it was trying to make it more accessible for young people, and also trying to make sure that the young people I guess who participated didn't feel like it would be tokenistic as well. And like Georgina said, we did a bit with sort of at the end with going through sort of what had come out of those I guess that children's activity, and doing that bit of reframing sort of stuff too. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Tash. That was great. And a reflection of mine from this research has been how we started off with a large project advisory group, and that involved the young people and a number of adults. And that was something that was a steep learning curve for me, in the sense of it perhaps not being an accessible, safe space for the young advisory or the young advisory group members. Did you want to talk a bit about that and how that shifted your involvement and the young people's involvement in the project?
Yeah, I think initially when we went in, like Georgina said, it was a lot of like adults in the space, and only like it was like kind of like a majority adult, kind of a few of us young people, and I think it was quite overwhelming in the beginning, and also it felt really difficult to have conversations. Because it it felt like we like from my personal experience, it didn't feel like we had a lot of like options to have input at that point in time, just because I think there were so many voices, and it was a very adult centric space. So what ended up happening is that like Georgina, you took on that feedback really well, and we ended up just doing Georgina and then the young people in a group together, and then just work through that sort of children's activity together that way instead, and that worked much better because it meant that we were able to, I guess, have our own space and work with Georgina in a way that was much more co-design than I like being in that big space with those like different professionals. So that was really good that we had that shift from being very yeah, that very big group to being just us working through that activity.
Thanks, Tash. And Lachlan, hi, can I hand over to you now to talk about your role in the project?
Yeah, thanks. So I participated in the stage where they were collecting all the answers based on what the kids felt about the services. So that was the quantitative data we did in the start. So my mum introduced me to that, and I did that, got a nice gift voucher. And then I went on to the second stage in the workshops, and that's where I went through the data we got from the first stage in depth. And so we just kind of sifted through that and churned up some stuff to look at. We came up with some themes we thought were relevant. So, yeah.
Thanks, Lachlan. And following on from that, now that the research is finished, do you have any reflections on the process of being involved in a research project?
Well, I'm 12, so I've never done it before. And I think I'm very happy that I did, because I think I've made an impact on the world somehow, and that makes me very proud. And I'm just happy to be part of the group, happy to be helping out.
That's terrific. Thank you. And we're delighted to have you involved in the project. And as I said earlier, it was involvement of Lachlan, Tash, and the other young people that really was a highlight and a strength of this research. Tash, could I ask you that same question of, now that the research project is done, what reflections you have about the process and your involvement in research?
I think like a lot of the reflections sort of came like at the beginning, particularly with the shift from it being in that big group with the professionals to being more sort of just a group with us and you, Georgina, and like that. I think like what I learned from that is that research really can adapt to what children and young people need to be able to participate in that research. And I think often, like when I've been involved with research previously, that's not something that's really happened. Like it's been very stiff, and so to be able to be a part of a process and to know that research can actually shift so that it can accommodate what children and young people need to be able to be active participants in research is really, really important. And honestly, I'd love to see it more in research. I think there was, some learnings around like as well, like where we can impact some of this research as well. I think like my experience with research has always been like always at the end sort of part where people are like either they want to like you're not involved at the start so much or what the activity looks like, but you're always involved at sort of at the end where you either help interpret a little bit of the data or you're the actual participant. So I think going through the process of the research project as well was a pretty like good experience for me in some ways. And yeah, I think it really showed just how involved children and young people can be and how important that is as well.
Thanks, Tash. Thank you. Now, Lachlan, I'll ask you, do you have some recommendations that you would give to services working with children and young people in the family violence sector?
So a really big one for me is to really understand that every kid is different. For example, me and my little brother, we went through pretty much exactly the same thing at a very young age. But he still today can't talk about any of it, and he's so upset by it when it's brought up. So, you kind of have to get to know the kid, and based on that, you should gauge what to talk about, and just understand that every kid is different. It is really important. And then also time is so important. I only got 2 1-hour sessions with a counselor from a service, and we did the 2 sessions and then it was over, and I was kind of like, well, what was the point of that? So you really need to offer the time to get to know the kid, to understand them, and to make them feel heard, because time is a really big element to that. So that's mine.
Thanks, Lachlan. That's excellent. And Tash, do you want to jump in there about your recommendations?
Yeah, I think there's like maybe a couple of things, and the first one is that it's something that I feel like people have heard before, but I think it's really important to always reiterate, is that like don't be afraid of the idea of re-traumatization. Children and young people are already living the experience. They know what's going on for them. They know their needs. You know, like sometimes, you know, they need help to articulate those needs, but they generally know what they need. So, you know, don't be afraid to have these conversations with young people, like, and, you know, like if it, you know, you don't need to be like, I think there's probably an element of fear about that re-traumatization and about creating more harm, but ultimately, like they are living through that. They're going to potentially have to live through and deal with those consequences of that situation from decades to come. And you could be the turning point for that child or young person where they finally, you know, are able to get some of that help that they need to then, you know, sort of transition out of that family violence situation potentially. And I think like the other thing that's really important is to really meet young people where they're at, you know, like not just, you know, in spaces where, you know, you're comfortable, but spaces where the young people may be comfortable, and in sort of like ways that the young people need. So some young people may want to engage with you in a way that isn't verbal. So, you know, that may be them writing things down or having someone they trust help write things down. That may be them sitting down, you know, for maybe an hour or so before even talking to you, playing video games or something like that. Or just building rapport with that young person before you engage with them. And I think Lachlan put it really well, like you need time, like you can't just do this in a couple of hours. Like it's really not something that's, you know, that simple. And I know that can be difficult given, you know, you may have like certain amounts of time that you can only spend with a client, but if you can build in some of that rapport building, it can be really important for those children and young people.
That's so well put, Tash and Lachlan. Thank you. And as you said, you've got lots of comments about, you know, agreeing with the points you're making there about space and time and meeting young people with where they're at. Next question is one that relates to broader policy and in particular the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. A vision of that plan is to end gender-based violence in one generation. What changes do you think need to happen to achieve this? It's a very big question.
Me?
Yeah, very happy for you to
go. So obviously I'm in high school right now, got some kids screaming in the background. And right here, I'm seeing, you know, you see a lot of posters and stuff to stop it. But I think you have to kind of get more in depth with it, educating kids right down at my level, because, you know, me and all the other 12-year-olds here today, we are pretty much clean slates. And if you want to stop it in the future, you have to start with the clean slates. You gotta make it in depth. You need to make kids understand. So it's not all about just throwing up posters all over the walls. It's about giving teachers time and space to interview kids. So I think in education, it's very, very important.
Thank you, Lachlan. Tash, did you want to jump in there?
I mean, I feel like people may have heard me say stuff before, but we do need a dedicated family violence service specifically for children and young people. Honestly, I think that's probably one of the better ways to help with a lot of this stuff, because at the moment, children and young people are being directed like to homelessness services or into out-of-home care, and neither of those are very ideal for children and young people, especially with the state of the housing crisis at the moment. It's not very helpful. A lot of young people will end up going back to the same situation because it literally is their only choice. So having a dedicated family violence service for children and young people is extremely important, and having like, you know, dedicated housing for some of these young people would be really, really important. And you know, like the less young people who are having to stay in these situations, you know, hopefully the more likely they are to then be able to get to a place later in life where they don't have to, you know, experience this as a victim or a perpetrator or however else it may happen. And I think, you know, some of the other things is literally sort of what's already been discussed today, which is you need to start talking to children and young people, like when they visit your service. You can't just speak to the parents, and you need to be able to speak to those children and young people in an age appropriate way, in a way that, you know, works for them, you know, do that rapport building. But also I think what's really important is really understanding the risks of what it looks like to speak to children and young people, and that sometimes, you know, despite how it may seem, you know, the primary parent may also be a perpetrator to that child or young person, and siblings may also be perpetrators to other siblings in those situations. So it's really important that you think about the dynamics in families and the best way that you can speak to those children and young people without putting them at risk when they go home, potentially at the end of the day, once they're finished with your service.
Thank you, Tash and Lachlan. They're fantastic insights and suggestions. And Tash, your comment about listening to young people leads nicely to one more question that I had for both of you, which is, how can governments and policymakers better listen to children and young people when they are making laws and policies to end family violence? Tash, do you want to go first this time with this one?
Oh yeah, sure. Honestly, it would be nice to actually see some more, like, because at the moment family violence advocacy really for children and young people is kind of non-existent. Like it's sort of gaining a bit more traction, but it's not really the same that it would be for women who are advocating around family violence. Or if you think about the mental health system, how well regulated and you know, how many sort of roles there are for lived experience in mental health, there really is non-existent currently in family violence almost. So I think, you know, like having more and more options for children and young people to participate in advocacy roles would be really important, and for those to be protected roles that are regulated as well, that are paid, which is, I think, is really important, because, you know, like children and young people, you know, and any advocate who has lived experience, like, you know, you're taking a lot of time out of your life to be able to commit to this stuff, and that's really important. It'd be great to see, honestly, more and more like advisory groups and like dedicated roles, like, and potentially have like options for, you know, young people who may be a bit older to sort of be placed in organizations as like sort of peer roles to work with children and young people who are experiencing family violence as well. But I ultimately think that, like, we need more children and young people sort of at a state and federal level, you know, to be able to talk to these issues so that we're actually seeing effective change for children and young people.
Thank you, Tash. And Lachlan, what are your thoughts on how governments and policymakers can better listen to children and young people?
Well, I think I completely agree with Tash. It's very important to publicise kids like me to go out there and do this advocacy. And I also think that giving kids more of a voice in courts and in a legal setting in an age appropriate manner is very important to putting it under the nose of people making legislation. That's how you get people to realize this is kids can represent these legal things, and we need to work harder for the kids. So yeah, you really need to give kids a chance to get out there and, you know, be important, because in my experience I didn't really have any say at all when my mum and dad were divorcing. I didn't really have any clue what was going on. I wasn't really told much, and although I did give what I wanted for what to happen, I feel like it wasn't really listened to, and it was kind of just brushed aside. So it's very, very important to give kids a voice in their own lives as well as legal settings.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Tash and Lachlan. And they were all the questions I had. So I can see that there are a number of questions in the chat here. Mandy, can I pass back to you for the open Q&A now? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm a bit stuck for words just with the sheer power of your voices and the insights you're able to provide. And I imagine you're not really looking at the chat because you're concentrating on the questions, which is why there's such excellent answers you've given. But just a little flavour of how people are experiencing what you're saying. Agree with you 100%, Lachlan. Prevention is the key. Amazing words from you both for people who are so young. A clear slate is so important, Lachlan. Tash, you've been in this space for a long time and you've made an amazing difference as a leader and an advocate. We're going to save these messages and provide them to you because I think if anything, they underestimate, even with how wonderfully positive they are. They're just amazing. So thank you so much for your honesty and bravery talking about such difficult things and participating. But we do have some other questions. So we've had a few questions about the engagement of children and young people as co-researchers and in the research, goodness me, see, I'm not nearly as articulate as you, research processes. And I suppose I first wanted to ask Lachlan and Tash, what would you say to other young people, to a double-pronged question, what would you say to other young people who are considering this, and what advice would you give to help them navigate it? And the second one is, what would you say to researchers? So one's to the engaging young people and the other is, what do researchers need to know to make this as good a space as it can be? Who wants to go first? Tash, are you ready?
Oh, yeah. So the first question was about young people participating in co-research. So it's about, sorry, because it was like two questions, my brain was like not working. So is it about like what advice to give? Is that?
Yeah, I suppose I was interested in, because often engagement can be difficult as well, probably because the way that researchers do it. So I suppose I was wondering about your tips for the young people, because you clearly advocated very strongly for what you needed in this process. And I suppose from what you've learned, what would you tell other young people getting involved?
I think just go for it, to be perfectly honest. Like sometimes, like honestly, it's difficult to find some of this in the first place, to be perfectly honest. And there's not a lot going around particularly family violence research that children and young people can participate in. But if you do find it, like just apply for it. Like even if you feel like you may be lacking in skills or things like that, because that's definitely something I've felt at points in time in my journey. Or if you feel like it's a really big thing, and you might not be able to participate the whole way through. Like just apply for it and be involved and really be I guess articulate, but like it can be really difficult because it's sometimes you have to sort of, it can be difficult to constantly advocate for yourself, but I think it's really good, like if you have the strength and you have the voice, like just tell them exactly what you need for that process. Like do you need lots of breaks? Do you need to do this only at these sort of times of day? What activities do you have on that may clash with things? Like just be really articulate, or like really clear about where your boundaries are with the research as well, so that you're keeping yourself safe too. So like, what are topics that you don't want to talk about? What are topics that you're comfortable talking about? Things like that. And I think definitely bring in a support person if you need, like, and really like have them advocate for you if you're not feeling comfortable as well. Like there's nothing wrong with at all, like with you going, this is a lot for me, but there's someone here who can really support me and really talk to sort of what I need, and just having that person there. And I think that's something that researchers should be aware of as well, is that like there is like young people have a lot of different things that they're doing throughout their life, and their participation through that research may look different at different points in time. And sometimes they may be involved less, sometimes they may be involved more, but it's really important to always check in with them about are they feeling comfortable in the research? What do they need to continue to be supported to do the research? Are they feeling like this is still something that they want to engage with? And also like being like really, really accommodating around, again, like what the young people need, you know, where they're at, and really, I guess, making it as safe of a place as possible. So, like, you know, if you can, as a researcher, I think it's really important to bring in a peer researcher, so someone who has a bit, you know, may not have experience in maybe research, but may have already been doing some advocacy around family violence before, or whatever it is you're researching, who may have done work with other children and young people, so that they can help then facilitate some of that, like to making the space really safe for those children and young people who want to participate in that research. And yeah, I think you know, like there's a lot that peer researchers can do as well around some of that project management too, if that's something that may be a bit difficult for the researcher to do as well, which is something that I've had experience with recently with something. So, but yeah, I think, you know, like it really is about open communication with children and young people and what they need. And if you can, make sure the onus isn't on the child and young person to really have these conversations with you. Like, make sure that you're always open to having those conversations with young people and ask specifically about it too. Sorry if that's really long, but
there was just so much in that, Tash. I just think there's a bit of a recipe there, right there. And the last point about researchers actually informing themselves about this is actually the way to approach it, so that a young person doesn't have to come cold to that. That would be really valuable. Lachlan, would you have things you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think you're completely right. You really do need to jump into it, because I was really, really nervous at the start. I'm a 12-year-old kid going into family violence advocacy, and few months ago, I probably wouldn't have even known what that meant. So there was a lot of nervousness around surrounding me, even just going into this meeting. Like, what if I stuff it up? What if I just sound like a really silly 12-year-old? But seeing all the positivity in chat and all the really kind people, I just appreciate it so much, and it feels so good to be part of something bigger. And so yeah, jump into it. And then for practitioners, you kind of have to trust the child in a way that, you know, have some trust that they are there, and just get to know them, know the child, trust them, be friends with them. So yeah, I really think jump into it, be friends with the child. That's my advice. So yeah.
I know one real concern is fear of getting it wrong and fear of re-traumatizing. So I really take also showing the respect that a young person will be able to have some advocacy and knows your own minds. That's what I'm hearing. On that score as well, just to finish up, Georgina, because we sort of watched this, we were involved in the project group behind the scenes, and I watched the transformation you managed to make through this input. And I suppose if you would reflect on what the learning for that for potentially other researchers, because it might not come naturally, you might not get it right off the bat. What would you say?
Absolutely, thanks, Mandy, and that's something that Tash alluded to when we talked about when they mentioned the initial project advisory group. That and from my perspective and experience, it was a very steep learning curve. It was the first research project I'd done that involved children and young people, and collaborating with them in that way, I would say, really required me to take a step back and reflect on doing research about children and young people is very different to doing research with children and young people, and said respecting the young people as experts on this topic, as experts in their own lives, being able to instill that trust, that open communication, and particularly being flexible with the process. So that's something I had to balance the project deadlines with ensuring that children and young people were meaningfully and safely able to participate in this research. Something that Tash alluded to earlier as well was the involvement that the Youth Advisory Group played in the ethics approval process to do this research. So the children's activity had developed an innovative co-consent process whereby the participants could select a trusted adult who might have been their parent, but could have been a friend, a sibling, a neighbour, a caseworker, a teacher, to provide co-consent to their participation in the activity. Now, that was approved by the University Ethics Committee, and that idea came from the young people on this project who explained why it was important to give children and young people that choice and agency. So I think something that I learned was that this project was really driven by the ideas and the expertise of the young people. Tash, another young person in the advisory group, Kira, and also Liam, who was on the advisory group, and I have co-written an article reflecting on our experiences of working together on this project, and that's going to be published in the journal Childhood quite soon. So that's something that I can circulate through the Open Network. And even just the process of writing that article together really made me, we flipped the process over in that the young people led that article process. So they convened a workshop. I was an attendee at that workshop. The young people led that. The article is written from their point of view, and I have a reflection in there. And often it's the other way around, where the researcher writes about how wonderful the project has been, and there might be some snippets or quotes from the young people in that reflection. So something that I found important is also to accept my own vulnerabilities in doing this research. As you said, Mandy, we might not always get it right the first time, but being willing to learn from the young people and appreciate and respect them as experts is something that I felt has been a highlight for me of this project, and I hope to continue doing this research. Thank you.
Yeah. And fundamental to displaying respect for that expertise, I think, because I think as professionals in these roles, we hold our expertise very close, and it's a competitive world, but actually putting that on the back burner for the far more valuable mission of making a difference and hearing from diverse voices. Really interesting that you mentioned the ethics process, because that is a real thorn, isn't it, in terms of more fully engaging children and young people or other vulnerable groups as well. So I'd be fascinated to read that paper, and we will spread it far and wide.
Thank you.
In winding up, I've got two more questions, actually. One is to you, Georgina, and then I wanted to open up, what would your key messages be? So firstly to you, Georgina, well, all of you, perhaps, I don't know what you're planning next, where the toolkit is amazing. I've heard how amazing it is from various practitioners around the place. What are you going to do next to further consolidate? Is there anything in the planning stages?
Sure, I can talk about the project itself. So the project has developed a children's feedback toolkit that services can use to better support them to engage with children and young people and enable children and young people to give feedback about their service experience. And so that will be launched soon together with the report from this project. And so that's something that I'll be able to circulate soon and let you know about. And I've also just started a new research project that is engaging with children and young people who have experience of the family law system and working with them to understand their experiences of participation. Because as you might have seen from some of the findings I presented, the family law system emerged as a barrier to effectively supporting children and young people who have experienced family violence. So that's what's next on my agenda, but I'd love to hear from Lachlan and Tash about what they're working on too.
I'm happy to go first, but honestly, I'm not sure if I'm gonna about like what I'm working on really, because I think it's all just like bits and pieces. Like I continue to do bits and pieces here and there around family violence, but I think ultimately this may be one of the last years that I continue to do this work. So, like yeah, and I think there's a lot of upcoming advocates like Lachlan who who are amazing and who have a lot of like current insights into the system, and I'm honestly very, very much looking forward to seeing the family violence advocacy space grow for children and young people and what that looks like, and just hearing from young people with much more like varied experiences. So
have you got next steps in mind, Lachlan? Are you going to see what sort of emerges? Because as you say, you've got a long time to be a really influential leader.
Yeah, well, I've got plans to in the future lead this sector, and I really want to make it better for kids, not just in Australia, but around the globe. And I'm going to continue putting all of my effort into helping people and doing this because it is just such an amazing cause. I'll say I don't want to be in class, but I really prefer this. I'm so happy, and I have 100% plans to continue this in the future. I will keep on going on and on.
Oh, goodness me. I think that's a perfect time to say thank you very much. I think you have probably lifted everyone's spirits today with your comments and insight and the value of this shared work together. I suppose just to capture, and I'm going to send you these comments, but after listening to your plans, the entire conversation from Sally, from our audience, is making me feel very positive about the future in the area of family violence and prevention, especially with emerging leaders like you both. And the value of enabling you to take on that leadership role is writ large across what you were saying today. So hopefully we won't be strangers, and there'll be a lot of people reaching out to engage you about your ideas further. And Lachlan, look, you're already well on your way and you're 12. So more power to you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tash, because I know you've done the good fight for a good long time too, because I've seen your name everywhere. So
Thanks.
good on you. Thank you very much. We might now have to move on, and I think we need to take a breath, frankly. Everyone just centre. Thank you so much to our guests in this first part of the session. I'll now hand over to Jeanette O'Neill, one of our partners in the Family Violence, Sexual Violence Hub project. We're all in this together. I'll hand it over to you, Jeanette, and if you want to introduce away.
Thank you, Mandy. And before I begin, again, I just want to mirror what Mandy said. Thank you so much, Georgina and Lachlan and Tash, for your bravery. It was just beautiful listening to your words. So thank you. Okay, so over to our next presenter, Emma Nugent. So Emma is a project officer at the centre. Her current role is focused on building sector capacity around MARAM and the information sharing schemes for the child and family service sector. She also supports the adolescent and young person using violence in the home practice leadership project. Through these roles, Emma seeks to help to ensure research and data is accessible and that service agencies have the space and the capacity to build evidence base together. Emma has strong interest in the rights of children and young people to ensure access to services and supports for equitable for all. Emma will also be facilitating a discussion with Stephanie O'Malley, exploring practice insights. Stephanie O'Malley is a family service practitioner at Upper Murray Family Care. So Emma, over to you.
Thanks, Jeanette. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Aboriginal land. For me, it is the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past and present, and extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Before I begin as well, I'd also like to thank Georgina for her presentation and thank Lachlan and Tash for their incredible insights and for sharing their experiences. I'm sure I won't be nearly as articulate as they were just before, but I'll try my best. As Jeanette was saying, my name is Emma Nugent. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a project officer at the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare. Over the past few years, I have worked on the MARAM Sector Capacity Building Grants project, funded by Family Safety Victoria and the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. This project sees the Centre develop tailored support initiatives to support the implementation of MARAM, the Family Violence Information Sharing Scheme, and the Child Information Sharing Scheme through resource development, the convening of communities of practice, and one-on-one support from member agencies. Now, I know I've just used a couple of different acronyms there, and while most of you I would assume know what MARAM is, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the confusion that our acronyms often can bring. So for those who aren't familiar, MARAM stands for the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment and Management Framework. MARAM has been developed based on current best research to reduce the risk of family violence and keep people who use family violence in view and accountable. Addressing family violence requires a whole of community response and coordinated systems working together to support adult and child victim survivors and address risk and safety needs, as well as promote accountability of adults using family violence. MARAM is embedded in law under Part 11 of the Family Violence Protection Act 2008 and establishes the foundations for a consistent statewide approach and shared responsibility for identifying and responding to family violence. The framework guides family violence risk identification, assessment, and management. The framework also works to ensure that people affected by, experiencing, or using family violence are provided with an appropriate, consistent, and capable response, no matter where or how they engage with services. MARAM also acknowledges children as victim survivors in their own right and improves professional capacity to respond, ensuring people understand, prioritise, and provide the most suitable responses to ensure that their needs are met and the risk of family violence is managed. MARAM has been designed to promote the safety and wellbeing of children and young people by improving early identification of issues or risks, including family violence risk, and enabling earlier support and participation in services, increasing collaboration, supporting a more coordinated and integrated approach to service delivery across the service system, empowering professionals to make informed decisions, promoting shared responsibility for wellbeing and safety, and defining responsibilities for identifying family violence across the service system, including creating consistent and collaborative practice, and identifying wellbeing and safety issues and risks and obtaining relevant information to share in relation to family violence. These 5 points are explored further in the Centre's MARAM case study resource, the snapshot of good practice, putting the multi-agency risk assessment and management framework into action. This case study resource is being launched today. You can access the link through the open portal. I'm not sure if this being a link put in the chat, but there may be, but otherwise you can go through the open portal and find it there. This resource seeks to assist the child and family services sector and other prescribed sectors who work with children and their families to enhance their understanding of how the MARAM framework can be applied to reduce family violence risk and enhance child safety and wellbeing. The resource contains 4 practice examples. The examples may be used individually in one-on-one sessions or group sessions to improve capacity to utilise MARAM when working with a range of prescribed services. Today, we are fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be joined by a practitioner who has contributed to this resource, Stephanie O'Malley. Steph is a family services practitioner from Apple Marriott Family Care. Stephanie's practice examples detail experiences of Alana, Charlie, Eva, and Sophie, case study 3 in the resource, and highlights the importance of an integrated response when there is a high level of risk to support both adult and child victim survivors. Before we get into some questions, Steph, can you please give a general overview of the practice example you submitted? Think about how you worked with the family to achieve positive outcomes to support their safety and well-being.
Sure, thank you. Before I respond, I just want to say thank you to Tash and Lachlan for sharing today. I think that has been a timely reminder to really listen to our children who are our clients and yes, acknowledge that they are victims in their own right, but they are also the experts in their own life. So we need to really take that time to listen to them. But yes, so my case study, this was a young family who I was working with for around 12 months. And it was a ever-changing risk to both the children and mum when dad was using family violence. There were multiple services involved that we referred the family to and actually spoke with to manage that risk across the service sector. We collaborated with the childcares for the young 2 children because they were ages 2 and 3. We collaborated with the maternal child health service. There was child protection involved. There was mental health for dad. And then there was also a family violence child safety team practitioners involved with the family as well. So we worked with them over the 12 months to just manage the risk to mum and the children and really listen to her and her views as to what she was wanting, which was to stay in a relationship and supporting mum to be in the family. And we actually also involved dad in this piece of work as well to kind of manage what was going on for him and to try to hold him account to his behaviours in the home. And we got to the stage where unfortunately the risk was too high for the kids and mum, and we, alongside the Centre Against Violence, who is the crisis family violence support service in Wodonga and Ovens Murray, supported mum and the children to flee the family home and move to Melbourne. So it was, I guess, where we used the MARAM was just to, over time, see where the risk was at for mum and the kids and highlight that for the family as well, and to support mum around that change in risk and what that meant for her and her kids.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, and for sharing more broadly with the sector through the resource. Moving on to some questions, it would be great to get a sense of how you use MARAM as a practitioner in your organisation, and how other practitioners can use the framework to effectively support children and young people and their families. Can you tell us why MARAM is important in supporting children with an experience of family violence?
I think we are all very aware today is that children are a victim of family violence in their own right, and that doesn't mean that they have to be physically hurt by the perpetrator. They don't have to be the target. They don't even have to witness it. They can just be impacted by the effects of the family violence by living in a home where mum or dad has been a victim of family violence. So MARAM is, I think it's important to understand what is going on for the child and to formulate a risk assessment for them, to come up with a safety plan and some goal settings for those children, because they are a victim in their own right.
Great. Thanks so much, Steph. How do you ensure your practice remains child-focused when engaging with families?
So at Upper Murray Family Care, we do actually have sessions with our children who are clients. We, if it's age appropriate, we do talk to them about the family violence and see what's going on for them. And we do complete the MARAM assessments with the children if it's appropriate. But I think something that we do well at Upper Murray Family Care is that we step into the child's world and we get to know them. That doesn't always necessarily mean having a conversation with them about a safety plan, what they need to be doing. We have outreach to their schools. We see them at parks. We can spend the session playing the Xbox with them. But I think we use the MARAM with the children to assess what's going on for them. But we also contact schools. We contact other services that are involved with them to share the information with them about what is going on for the family. Sometimes schools have no idea that this child is in a home where there's family violence going on. So we share that information with them, and then they can feed back to us any information they have regarding what's going on for the child, if they're seeing any changes in their behaviour, if their presentation is a little bit different to what it used to be, if the children are going to school with food or not, do they have to feed them weekly, are they providing the children clothes, what is it that family services can do to support the children and the family.
Amazing, thank you. Well, I've got one last question, just because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah.
But do you have any advice for participants today who are starting out with MARAM?
For MARAM, I think it would be to collaborate and share information with other services, hold professionals meetings, start email chains, just where services can actually just flick an email back to all the other services working with the family if they've had a session with mum or with the children, just to share any risk or any protective factors as well, and strengths. Let's start sharing some of that across the table as well, to actually document what mum is doing well to protect herself and her children. I think it's also important to, as Lachlan and Tash said, just to talk to the children, get to know them and understand what's going on in their world, and to be mindful that whilst they might just be a client that we see once a week for an hour, that you might be that person who makes them smile for that one time a week. So to really be mindful of who you are, actually, you're going into their world, they're not stepping into yours. So just to be mindful of that.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all your valuable insights. You can find Steph's practice example within the Snapshot of Good Practice, putting the MARAM framework into action case study resource. As I said, that's available in the link or through the Open portal. Please do reach out if you have any questions. I'm sure the Open team can pass along my details as needed. Thank you.
Thank you both, Emma, for outlining this important piece of work. And we've had a look at the case studies and they'll be really, really valuable. We've put them into the chat, but the case studies will also go on the Family Violence and Sexual Violence Knowledge Hub as a resource you can draw upon more fully, and that should be within the next few months. Steph is now not spotlighted, but thank you very much, Steph. It's really interesting to get insights from on the ground, how this actually sort of matters and can be used. And I love the way your narrative, and I know this is the key driver, about centering and meeting the children where they are, and centering their needs as much as everyone else's in the situation. So yeah, I think we included the word innovations in the title of this session, and I do think there are lots of areas for future improvement. We would all be here to agree with that. But all of the things we're working on and learning together really flag sort of such a significant shift in this sort of space over the last few years. So it is really exciting days, even if it can seem like a huge mountain sometimes. So really, this session has been really wonderful. Just checking my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. Thank you for all our presenters today. And I think I once again reflect on our practice knowledge hub for the family violence and sexual violence joint workforces, which include anyone who works with children or young people or families experiencing family violence or sexual violence, whether it's specialist services, or whether it's generalist services. I can just see the value we will get out of jointly sharing our areas of expertise across research, policy, practice, and lived experience. And I'm really excited for our future to be able to pull that knowledge. Your feedback is really important to us, and even more so in relation to this new area of work, because we really want to tap into what are the areas you need research, information, knowledge translation about, and also what are the innovations you're seeing in your own work. We will have ongoing activities where we will be profiling and sharing expertise from our joint specialists across our sector. So please reach out to anyone who's in our project team to share both your needs and what you could contribute, because we all have our own learnings we can contribute. We've put our feedback form in the chat. If you were willing to fill that out, that would be really helpful for us. We are continuing, as we said, this is our first events in a 3-event series at this stage, rolling out over the next 2 or 3 months. The next one is on the 22nd of August at 12:30 with Emerging Minds, providing a deeper dive into promoting children's mental health and well-being in the context of family and domestic violence. So it follows on this theme. It will be advertised next week through open newsletter and across all the member organisations of our peak partners in this project. If you're not on any of those lists, please just reach out to one of us and we'll put you on there, and then you'll get updated information. Thanks once again to all our presenters and panel members, with the generosity of sharing, because we all know this takes people work to do this, and it's a contribution to our joint knowledge. So thank you once again, and hopefully we'll see you all at our next session in a little bit over a month. Thank you.